As always, we have so much to talk about when it comes to Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now we have our guest, political analyst James Dorsey, is joining us from all the way from Singapore to shed more light on today's latest developments and the international engagements that have taken place regarding the war in the occupied Strip. Mr. Dorsey, welcome back to ANews once again.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask you about the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit, because he has wrapped up his tour to the Middle East and Turkey. He met the Turkish foreign minister earlier today, where he said the United States and Turkey will continue to work in multiple domains and the Israeli war in Gaza. How important was this tour for the American Secretary of State and his bid to justify Israel's ongoing war?
Well, first of all, I think this is probably not his last tour. We're going to see more of Antony Blinken, as well as of other senior officials. The head of the Central Intelligence Agency is currently in the region. So we're going to see that for quite some time, I think. I don't think it's so much a question of justifying Israel's invasion of Gaza as much as wanting to manage it. And so far, the United States has not been very successful at that. It's not been very successful in terms of getting the Israelis to change some of their tactics in Gaza, not end the war, but significantly enhance security for the civilian population. And it's not been very successful in terms of either getting hostages out or in terms of coming to a common understanding with Turkey, but also with the Arab states on what should be the next step. Clearly, the United States is out of step with most countries in the world in terms of whether or not a ceasefire should be the immediate response.
Mr. Dorsey, also we have actually come to a trademark, a 1 month long attacks that is happening from Israel to Gaza Strip and the Palestinians in general. As if right now at least 160 Palestinians have been killed in West Bank, occupied West Bank. And what do you think it tells us about the atrocities that Israel does?
I think what you've got is certainly in the case of Hamas and Israel, mirror images of one another. Hamas's assumption is that there are no innocent civilians in Israel. And Israel's various officials have stated that, said that there are no innocent civilians in Gaza. And so in many ways, they're mirror images of each other. And what we're seeing is, as a result of that, an escalating, spiraling cycle of violence for which primarily Israelis have paid, but first and foremost now, Palestinians are paying the price.
The point in there is actually quite important, that they are the mirror image of one another. One is called an organization, the other is called a government, a constitution, a country. What would they say about the situation in Israel? Because Israel is bound to act like a government that works with the international law, whereas Hamas is just Hamas with no indication of having a government for itself. What does it say about Israel as a country and as a government?
I don't think it's that simple. First of all, what I'm talking about is attitudes irrelevant of what kind of an institutional framework you're talking about. Second of all, the assumption in your question is that not only that Israel as a state is bound by international law, but Hamas is not. It is bound by international law. And Hamas is the governor of an entity in Gaza, which is not internationally recognized as such, but nonetheless, it is the party in power in the region, and it runs the services of a government in the region. So I don't think it's quite that simple to say this is, well, here's a group of fighters and here's a state. none of this relieves any of the parties, including Israel, of its responsibilities. And none of this means that that both Israel and Hamas have violated international law. And in that sense, it is a mirror image of each other.
Do we expect this to continue in both parties as of right now, or do we expect any resolution in one way or another?
Well, I don't think there's going to be a resolution. I think, if anything, what has happened with the October 7 attack and with the Israeli assault on Gaza, that the chances of trying to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict are further away than they have been in a very long time. It's going to take a lot to overcome the raw emotions, the feelings of revenge, the distrust, the resentment. I think what we're going to see is, in the immediate future, increasing pressure on the United States as well as on Israel to, at the very least, alter its military strategy, if not accept a ceasefire.
Also, I would like to ask you about the situation that takes place today, actually. A Palestinian resistance icon, Ahed Tamimi is his name, was also arrested by Israel in the occupied West Bank. What do you think? Why do you think Israel is taking such measures? Is it to instill fear to Palestinians?
Well, I think one of the issues and one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one reason why the Israelis were so prepared on October 7 was that their focus was on the West Bank, where they had a burgeoning armed resistance. And what they're trying to do, and I'm not sure that they're going to be very successful, is prevent the West Bank from becoming, if you wish, a second front in this war, in which you see greater armed resistance, greater civil disobedience. And in typical fashion, they're doing that by cracking down.
I know it is a complicated issue, as you explained earlier, but I would also like to ask you about the situation with the European Commission, because from the start we've seen the EU saying that they are hand in hand and arm in arm with the Israeli government. But also right now they are saying that they are sparing some money for the Gazans. I think it is about 25 million euros they are sparing for the Gazans as of right now as an aid. Why do you think that the situation is, they think that the situation is going to finish with their indication of paying for the money, but also letting Israel continue taking the civilians as a target? What is the action, what is the thought behind the European Union as of right now?
I don't think the Europeans look at whatever amount of money they're setting aside for aid to Gaza as that being the final thing that they need to do. Mm-hmm. What I do think is that you have a major difference between the Europeans and the United States. We've seen on both sides of the Atlantic significant protests against the Israeli invasion and assault on Gaza. But I think in the United States, you have a much more divided public opinion than you actually have in Europe. There's a lot more popular opposition to the war in Europe. And you've also seen, which we have not seen in the United States, even though there are some indications of it, you've seen much more open disagreement between senior officials of the European Commission and the European Union. And I think what you're seeing on the part of the Europeans, and you look at the External Affairs Commissioner's statements earlier today to European ambassadors in Brussels, you're seeing an evolution in the European position. On the one hand, not one that is calling on Israel yet to accept a ceasefire, but nonetheless. And you're seeing a greater gap between what governments are saying and what significant segments of the public are saying.
Mr. Dorsey, thank you so much for joining us here on ANews. That was really insightful. I know that my questions are, time to time, is actually taking the situation a little bit easier than it actually is, but we are trying to understand the situation, and your comments are most important. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.